Hello again, and welcome back to BookBeat. I'm Larry, and yeah, this is the Spenser series. I do a few other series too of other things, but this is the Spenser series. And today we're going to look at book five. Uh, it's called The Judas Goat. I think it's one of his better books. I've read it and reread it quite a few times, and each time I read it, I really like it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how others have reacted in a minute or two. Okay, so yeah, Spenser, The Judas Goat. Interesting title, I think, huh? Yeah. So, um, who's in the story? Well, I guess one of the key characters is a guy named Hugh Dixon. Hugh Dixon comes into um, we meet Hugh Dixon again in future stories once or twice, but this is when we meet him for the first time. Basically, he's a billionaire industrialist, although in those days maybe he wasn't quite a billionaire, but in today's terms he would be called a billionaire. He was super rich, had far reach, he knew everyone, could get things done. But the thing is, when we meet him at the very beginning of the book, and I'm going to read to you some of the opening scenes because they're really well done, he's in a wheelchair. He's paralyzed. And the story is that on a trip to London, he and his wife and his two girls, who were in their late teens, were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Terrorists threw some bombs into a crowded square or cafe area. I don't remember the exact details. Killed his wife, killed his two girls. He was paralyzed. And now he doesn't have anything much to live for except to get revenge on these terrorists. They're kind of amateur terrorists, actually, who did this to him. And so that's why he has hired Spenser. Um, so who else is in the story? Well, there's a little bit of Susan in there. There's a lot of Hawk, which makes this a really good story. I've told you before how much I love the stories with Hawk in them. Two of the terrorists, one called Kathy or Catherine, and another one named Paul, are in the story and I guess are fairly important. And then we got one more terrorist, a guy named Zachary, who is just huge and incredibly strong. Um, he is described as being 305 pounds, 6'7", so he's about, for those who are in metric, who know metric, it's about 2 meters and 138 kilograms. Yeah, so 6 feet 7, 300 and so pounds. He's described as all muscle, a weightlifter, and I'm going to talk a little bit about him a little bit later too. So what's the situation? Well, um, this story takes place mainly overseas, and I want to tell you that that's a good thing, not a bad thing. If you read any reviews on Goodreads or I don't know, maybe on Amazon, wherever, a few people out there like really put the book down because they said it was like Robert B. Parker took a trip to Europe and so wanted to write about his experiences. I didn't get that feeling at all. I was pulled into him being in Europe. He first goes to London and Berkeley Square, the Mayflower Hotel, Regent's Park, and Zoo. After that, he is in Copenhagen when Hawk comes over to help him out. and after that, Amsterdam. And finally, they end up in Montreal for the 1976 Olympics. So there's a lot of traveling going on, a lot of places that we go to here with Spenser that we don't normally see. And I think it's really, really interesting. Like I said, I enjoyed it very much. So what is the action in this? Well, yeah, there's a lot of action. First of all, two times they make a try on Spenser's life when he's at the Mayfair Hotel in London. Him and Hawk get into some gun battles with the terrorists in Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And then in Montreal, Hugh Dixon manages quite easily to get tickets for them to go into the Olympic Stadium, where they spot Paul, who is in the about to set up a terrorist activity. He's planning on shooting winners getting their medals during the ceremony. And it's here that we meet Zachary, and where Hawk and Spenser have a fight with Zachary. I've described him to you before. He's just this huge guy. I've read all the Spenser books. This is easily the best fight that you are going to read in the Spenser books, in the Spenser series, and maybe in any book ever. This is a really well done, really interesting fight. And at the same time, the action is there, but it's also funny. There's humor in the fight, and man, he's a good writer for being able to pull that off. So, yeah, what are the surprises then in this book? Well, on page 26 and page 38, Spenser admits to being lonely. Susan drives him to the airport. He's waiting for his flight to London, and he's at his wit's end. He just misses her so much. And a similar thing happens to him in London. He's all alone there, and he's doing a lot of waiting before anything happens, and so he's kind of down and depressed. Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that. We don't get much of that in later Spenser books. So yeah, he's very sentimental, and that's kind of an interesting thing to know about him, where he came from, who he is deep down inside of him. Another surprising thing, and something we can respect him for, I think this comes up sometimes in some of the books. He did what Hugh Dixon wanted him to do. He fulfilled everything that was required of him in order to earn the money he's going to be paid. But he wants to continue on because there are things about the situation that bother him. He knows he's not going to get paid for them. He doesn't expect to get paid for them, but he's going to soldier on, and that willingness to go that extra mile, this pride in his work, these are repeats, his professionalism, it's surprising, but it is a thing that comes up again and again in almost every Spenser book. And it's an impressive part of who Spenser is. Well, here's another thing that surprised me. During the fight with Zachary, Hawk loses a tooth and spits it out onto the ground. Wow. That never comes up in any of the other books, and I guess he's got a good dentist, because he's always described as being incredibly handsome with beautiful teeth, but not in this one. He loses a tooth to this monster Zachary. Another nice thing here is that kind of surprised me was, we can see how the relationship between Hawk and Spenser is developing. In the very last book, book number 4, it was the very first time that we meet Hawk. Excuse me. So basically, Spenser and Hawk haven't really worked together yet. And so this is the first time actually that they're working together. And there's a little bit of awkwardness yet still between them. They're not really that close yet. They trust each other, but there's one-upmanship about their relationship still that is kind of interesting. And Hawk still talks way too much. This is not the Hawk that we know in later books. So that surprised me, that Hawk is getting closer to the Hawk we know, but it's still not him. So are there any other repeats here besides us finding out that seeing in Spenser that willingness to go the extra mile, the pride in his work, the professionalism? Susan, Hawk, his humor, his dry humor, and there it is again. Her makeup was expert. It's like, wow. Spenser really loves women with who are good at doing makeup. That's like his ideal. Another really interesting character, I mentioned her before, is Catherine or Kathy. She's one of the terrorists, but she actually, it turns out that she's a masochist sexually, and ends up helping Spenser and Hawk track down Paul in Montreal. But the scenes with her are very, very interesting, and she's one of the more interesting people in all of the Spenser books, I think. So all in all, this was a very well done book. Okay, well, let me just read a few things to you, mainly from the beginning of the book. I'm not going to read as much as I have in other books. You probably noticed I'm not a great voice reader. I guess I don't really have that great of a voice, and it's probably annoying to you listening to me read, but man, it really helps me develop a huge amount of respect for these guys that do the audiobooks, which I love. They're professional actors 100%, and how they can portray so many different characters so well, so completely in these audiobooks is amazing. But let me read a few of my favorite lines to you, okay? This is from the very beginning, and it's that dry wit, that dry humor. Robert B. Parker's really nice way of drawing us into a book. I think that is really good. Let me read one or two favorite lines from the beginning here. He says, Hugh Dixon's home sat on a hill in Weston and looked out over the low Massachusetts hill as if asphalt had not been invented yet. That's a very, very clever way of saying it was a huge piece of property, and it just goes on forever and ever and ever. So, okay, some more at Hugh Dixon's home. The bell made the standard high-tone chime sound in the house when I pushed the button, and while I waited for a servant to let me in, I checked my appearance reflected in the full-length windows on each side of the door. There was no way to tell, looking at me, that I only had $387 in the bank. 3-piece white linen suit, blue striped shirt, white silk tie, and mahogany loafers with understated tassels that Gucci would have sold his soul for. Maybe Dixon could hire me to stand around and dress up the place. Yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily read Robert B. Parker, and maybe I can say this about other people too, like Elmore Leonard, but good writers are just a pleasure to read, and it's not even so much the story and the plot and the mystery that draws me in, but the writing style, the tone, the voice, the wit, the humor. I love all of that. And Robert B. Parker, Spenser, with his Spenser, does that very well. Okay? Hugh Dixon, who is he? He's described like this. A man with a huge torso was sitting in a wheelchair with a light gray blanket over his lap and legs. He had a big head and thick black hair with a lot of gray and no sideburns. His face was thick-featured with a big meaty nose and long earlobes. The servant said, "Mr. Dixon," and gestured me toward him. Dixon didn't move as I walked over to him. He stared out over the hills. There was no sign of a book or magazine, no indication of paperwork, portable radio, TV, just the hills to look at. In his lap was a yellow cat asleep. Sorry, I'm going to take a sip of water here. There was nothing else on the terrace, no other furniture, not even a chair for me. So that's our meeting of Dixon, our first description of him. And here's a little bit more. There was no motion in the face. No sense that blood flowed beneath it and thoughts evolved behind it. It was all service, exact, detailed, and dead, except the eyes. The eyes snarled with life and purpose, or something like that. I didn't know exactly what then. Now I do. So we get a sense of who Hugh Dixon is right there. And Dixon starts to finally talk with Spenser, and he's asking him all kinds of questions. And then Spenser jumps in and says, "What are we going to do, Mr. Dixon? Play 20 questions until I guess what you want to hire me for?" "How much you think I weigh?" Dixon said. 245, 250, I said, but I can't see under the blanket. "I weigh 180. My legs are like 2 strings on a balloon." I didn't say anything. He took an 8x10 matted photograph out from under the blanket and held it out to me. The cat awoke and jumped down, annoyed. I took the picture. It was a Bachrach photo of a handsome 40-ish woman and 2 well-bred-looking girls in their late teens, Vassar, maybe, or Smith. I started to hand it back to him. He shook his head, left once, right once. "No," he said, "you keep it." "Your family?" used to be. They got blown into hamburger by a bomb in a restaurant in London a year ago. I remember my daughter's left foot was on the floor next to me, not attached to the rest of her, just her foot with her cork-soled shoe still on. I'd bought her the shoe that morning. I'm sorry didn't have the right ring for a moment like that, so I didn't try. I said, "That how you ended up in the chair?" He nodded once down, once up. I was in the hospital for nearly a year. His voice was like his face, flat and accurate and unhuman. There was a stillness in him that only his eyes denied. And I got something to do with this. He nodded again, once up, once down. I want them found. The bombers? Nod. And you know who they are? No. The London police say it's probably a group called Liberty. Why would they blow you up? Because we were where they threw the bomb. They did not know us or care about us. They had other things to think about, and they blew my entire family into garbage. I want them found. And that's all you know? I know what they look like. I was awake through it all, and I lay there and looked at each of them and memorized their faces. I know every one of them the minute I saw them. That's all I could do. I was paralyzed and I couldn't move, and I looked at them as they stood in the rubble and looked at what they'd done, and I memorized everything about them. He took a manila folder out from under the blanket and gave it to me. A Scotland Yard detective and an artist came with one of those drawing packs while I was in the hospital, and we made these pictures, and I gave them the descriptions. In the folder were 9 identikit sketches of young people, 8 men and a woman, and 10 pages of typewritten descriptions. I had copies made, he said. The pictures are pretty good, all of them. Do I keep these too? I said. Yes. You want me to find these people? Yes. I'll give you $2,500 a head, $25,000 for the lot, and expensive. Dead or alive? Either one. Yeah, so like I said, I think he does an excellent job here. Yeah, he goes to Europe, he goes to Montreal, but it's tastefully done. And yeah, what? Big deal. We find out that Spenser's a romanticist, but he's a romanticist in all of his books. So going to Europe and enjoying Europe, it didn't bother me at all. It added to the story quite a bit, and I think you'll enjoy it too. Thanks for joining me today. And yeah, this was another, I'd say 8 stars out of 10. I really liked it. It's not perfect yet, mainly because of Hawk, I think. Hawk's getting there, but he's not quite the Hawk we know and love yet. But he's on his way. So, thanks again. The next book, yeah, number 6, a real good one. Searching for Rachel Wallace, or Looking for Rachel Wallace. Sorry, one of those two. Another really good Spenser book coming next. Thanks a lot. See everyone next time. Take care.